I don't know how to explain what happened, but I feel like I need to get this off my chest. It doesn't make sense, but I can't stop thinking about it. Maybe I'm just tired or maybe I've lost it, but what happened today, it doesn't sit right with me. I was driving home from work, like I do every day. The route's familiar, the same stretch of road I take every time. It's about a 45-minute drive if the traffic's normal. Nothing out of the ordinary. But this time was different. I don't know why, but it was. The drive started as it always does. I left work, got in the car, and turned on my usual playlist. Nothing special about the start. I remember getting on the highway, the hum of the engine, the trees on either side. Same scenery, same gray skies. It was around 5:30 p.m. when I left. I checked the time before I left the parking lot. Nothing was unusual. The first few miles, I barely noticed anything. I just drove, lost in my thoughts, like usual. I passed the gas station I always stop at. I thought about stopping today, but I didn't. I figured I'd get gas tomorrow. But then, right around the halfway point, somewhere between two exits, I don't remember anything. I don't mean I fell asleep, or that I was daydreaming. I mean it's like there's a gap. A complete, black gap in my memory. I remember being on the road. And then I don't. There's nothing. No memory of the drive between those two exits. The road just goes blank in my mind. When I realized that, I checked my phone. The GPS was still on, and it had a route laid out. I pulled it up to see how much longer I had to go, but the time was off. The screen showed I had already arrived. At my house. I was an hour early. It wasn't like a few minutes or some time zone mix-up. I was off by a full hour. I had checked the time before I left the office, and then again when I pulled into the driveway. And it was definitely only about 5:30 p.m. when I got on the road. But the GPS said I'd arrived at 5 p.m. How? I don't know if I'm explaining this right, but I could feel my heart start to race. I sat there in the car for a minute just staring at my phone. It didn't make sense. I tried to piece it together. I knew something was wrong. My mind kept circling back to that stretch of road where I couldn't remember anything. Just a few miles, but it felt like they had disappeared. I couldn't even remember what was on the radio or what I had seen out the window. It's like I wasn't there for it. I didn't even think to check the time between the exits, at least not right away. I just sat there for a bit, trying to breathe. I got out of the car, walked up to my front door, and tried to shake it off. Maybe it was just stress. Maybe I'd zone out or something. But something didn't feel right. I kept looking at my phone, seeing that weird discrepancy in time. I kept going over the moments before and after. I was there. Then I wasn't. I tried calling my best friend to talk about it, but I couldn't reach her. No big deal, I thought. I didn't want to make a bigger deal of it than I had to. I figured I'd deal with it tomorrow. But then the weirdest thing happened. My GPS still showed my location as if I hadn't moved. Like, I was still on that stretch of road where I couldn't remember anything. But I was home. I checked it again and again, and it was the same. I wasn't at home. My phone was lying. I went inside, sat on the couch, and just stared at the walls for what felt like an eternity. My mind was racing. Was I losing my mind? Was I sleepwalking on the road? That didn't explain the GPS. It didn't explain the hour I couldn't account for. The gap. And then, something else hit me. I had a strange, unfamiliar feeling in my chest, like something had happened but I couldn't understand what. I walked into the kitchen, and when I opened the fridge, I found an unopened bottle of water. I didn't remember buying it, but it was there, sitting in the fridge. I always buy bottled water when I go out for groceries. But this one, it wasn't from a store I usually go to. The label was from a place I didn't recognize. I stared at it for a few moments, unsure if I was just seeing things, or if I had bought it and forgotten. I couldn't remember the last time I bought water, not at all. It should have been a simple thing to recall, but I couldn't. By now, my hands were shaking. I was starting to panic. I thought I might just be overthinking things. Maybe I had some sort of memory lapse from stress. I went to the bathroom to splash cold water on my face. But when I passed the mirror, I stopped dead in my tracks. For a moment, I just stared at myself. Nothing about me looked different. I didn't feel different. But then I noticed something I hadn't seen before. There was dirt on my shoes. Mud. Not a little either. Enough that I wondered how it got there. It looked like I had been walking in something soft, maybe wood ground, but I had driven the whole way. I hadn't left the car once, or so I thought. Now, I'm sitting here, writing this down, and I still can't make sense of it. I don't remember an hour of my drive. I don't remember why there's dirt on my shoes. I don't remember buying that bottle of water. It's been hours since I got home, and I keep checking the time. It still doesn't make sense. That hour is gone. I just don't know where it went. I don't know if I'll ever figure it out. But something's not right. Something's missing. And I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched. It was a regular evening, nothing special, just the kind of day that blends into the others. I had finished dinner, sat down with a book, and was trying to get through a couple of chapters before I went to bed. My phone was on the table next to me. I remember it was about 9:30 p.m., and I had just turned a page when the phone rang. I glanced at the screen. The number that popped up was mine. It wasn't a name or contact, just a number, the same digits I saw every time I looked at my phone. At first, I thought it was a mistake or some sort of glitch. Maybe a wrong number? But why would it show up as my own number? I thought maybe it was a spam call or some scammer using a tactic to get me to pick up. I hesitated for a moment but eventually answered. "Hello?" I said. There was a long pause. I didn't hear anything at first, just some static, like the connection wasn't great. Then a voice came through. It was my voice. But not quite. It wasn't my voice like it was right now. It was younger. It was me, but it sounded like my voice from a few years ago, back when I was living in that apartment across town, before everything changed. I couldn't explain it. But the voice was clearly mine, but somehow off. It was like hearing an old recording of myself, one I didn't know existed. I almost hung up, but then it started speaking. "Don't ignore this," the voice said. I froze. The words were too familiar, like it knew something about me. About what was coming. It went on. "Listen carefully. You'll need to make a choice soon. You're going to regret what you decide. Don't let them convince you. Stay firm." I felt this strange pressure in my chest. It felt real, too real. I started to feel my heart race as the voice continued. "I know you think you're safe. You're not. Don't go through with it. Don't go to the meeting. It's not what they say it is. I could barely breathe. I didn't know who was on the other end. It was me, but it wasn't me. My mind was spinning. I had to stop it. I had to stop whatever was happening. But I couldn't. I just stood there, holding the phone, listening. Remember this, because it won't be long now. You have to take the left turn, not the right. The right will get you in trouble. You'll lose everything if you take the right. The voice sounded more urgent now, more desperate. It was almost pleading, but in that strange, detached way that only a memory or a version of yourself could be. Then, as suddenly as it started, the line went dead. I stared at the phone, my heart pounding. My breath was shallow. I didn't even realize I had been holding the phone so tightly until my hands started to ache. For a moment, I just stood there in complete silence. I couldn't process what had just happened. Who was that? How was it even possible? I quickly tried to call back, but the line was already disconnected. I tried again, still no answer. It just kept ringing and ringing until it gave me the usual "this number is not available" message. I stood there in my living room, looking at my phone. My thoughts were scrambled. What just happened? Was it some sort of prank? I kept telling myself it had to be a mistake, or I had imagined it. It had to be. There was no other explanation. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized the voice had said things that I couldn't possibly know about yet. It mentioned a meeting I hadn't even scheduled, decisions I hadn't made. It spoke like it knew what I was going to do before I even made the decision. I sat back down, still holding the phone, staring at it like it might give me some sort of answer, some clue. My mind kept returning to the things the voice had said. The left turn. The right turn. It sounded so specific, so certain. But I had no idea what it was referring to. I kept thinking about the meeting it mentioned. I hadn't scheduled any kind of important meeting. Nothing that would warrant a warning, let alone a cryptic message from what felt like my own future self. I tried to forget it, tried to convince myself I was just overthinking it. It could have been some sort of glitch or maybe someone messing with me. But then again, how could anyone know what I was thinking? How could anyone know details like that? It didn't add up. The next few days were even more unsettling. I kept thinking about that call, about what it said. The voice. It wouldn't leave me alone. I tried to move past it, but the words kept echoing in my mind. It was like a nagging feeling I couldn't shake. Then, a few days later, I had to make a decision. There was a meeting that had come up last minute, one I hadn't expected. It wasn't something I was looking forward to, but it was important. I had to go. As I got in my car to head there, I remembered the call, the warning about the right turn and the left. I couldn't stop thinking about it. It was a bit ridiculous, but I decided I'd take the left turn, just in case. It felt strange, but I did it anyway. I figured I would make the decision and move on, not dwell on it. When I arrived at the meeting, everything seemed normal, too normal. But the more I looked around, the more I felt something was off. The people in the room, there was something about them that didn't sit right. It was like I was being watched, like they knew something I didn't. Something I couldn't explain. I started to feel this wave of unease wash over me. The meeting went as planned, but I couldn't stop looking around, trying to shake the feeling that I was out of place. That I didn't belong there. When it was finally over, I left as quickly as I could. I got in the car, and as I pulled out of the parking lot, I noticed something. I had taken the left turn. The one the voice had warned about. And nothing bad had happened. Nothing at all. But then I thought back to the call. The warning. The urgency in that voice. I got home that evening, tried to shake off the feeling, but as I sat on the couch, something caught my eye. It was my phone. On the screen, there was a message. It was from my own number. I stared at it for a long time before I opened it. There was no text, just a video. I pressed play. It was a clip of me walking out of the meeting. My face looked pale, like I hadn't slept in days. My eyes were wide, almost panicked. I didn't know how it was possible. I hadn't seen anyone recording me. The video ended abruptly, and the screen went black. My phone buzzed once more. A call came through. I didn't pick up. I couldn't. I don't really know how to explain what happened. It doesn't make sense to me, and the more I think about it, the more I feel like I'm losing my grip on things. But I swear this is real. I need to get it out before I drive myself crazy thinking about it. It started last Tuesday night. I was driving home from work, the usual route I take. It was late, probably around midnight. I hadn't intended to stay that late at the office, but I got caught up in a few things, and before I knew it, the parking lot was nearly empty. The streets were quiet, and I didn't mind it. I'm used to the solitude of the late-night drive. I got in the car and started the engine. The radio was off, just the hum of the engine and the soft swish of the tires against the road. It was peaceful. Or at least, it should have been. But somewhere along the way, I started to feel uneasy. Not like something was wrong, exactly. More like I wasn't alone. It's hard to describe, but it felt like there was someone else in the car with me. Not right next to me, but just present. The kind of feeling you get when you're walking in a dark room and you know there's someone there, even if you can't see them. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I glanced over at the passenger seat, but it was empty, just my jacket tossed across it. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling. It was like a weight in the air. A presence. And no matter how much I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, it wouldn't go away. At one point, I glanced at the rearview mirror. I didn't expect to see anything, but I couldn't help it. I thought maybe I'd catch a glimpse of someone sitting behind me, someone I hadn't noticed at first. But when I looked, the mirror was empty. There was nothing. I tried to brush it off, tell myself it was just the quiet of the night getting to me. But the feeling didn't go away. It was still there. A kind of pressure in the car. I kept looking at the road ahead, trying not to think about it. But I couldn't stop feeling it. It was like someone was there, just out of sight. I tried to keep my focus on driving. The streets were dark, and the lights from the street lamps flickered as I passed them. The car seemed to be picking up speed on its own, even though I wasn't pressing the gas any harder. Then something happened. A cold shiver ran down my spine. It wasn't like the usual chill you get when the air conditioning's too high or when you're nervous. No, this was different. This felt like the kind of cold you feel when someone opens a door behind you. A presence. I looked in the rearview mirror again. This time, I wasn't expecting to see anything, but I still checked. And again, nothing. But then I felt it this time. I could swear something was right behind me. I couldn't explain why, but it was as if there was a figure, just out of sight. It wasn't a full presence like a person sitting next to you, but it was enough to make my heart race. I was no longer alone in the car. That's how it felt. I don't know how much time passed, but I finally reached my neighborhood. The streets here were even darker, more isolated. As I pulled into my driveway, the pressure that had been in the car seemed to lift. It felt like whatever was there had left. The air in the car returned to normal, and I was finally able to breathe a little easier. I thought maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me, that maybe I had been too tired from work, or my thoughts had gotten the better of me. But when I got out of the car and walked around to the passenger side, something caught my eye. The window. The passenger side window. I don't know how to explain it, but there was a fingerprint. A fresh one. It was right on the window, smack in the middle. And it wasn't just any fingerprint. It was clear, too clear. Like it had just been pressed there, recently. I stared at it for a long time, trying to figure out what I was seeing. I was alone when I got in the car earlier, and I hadn't touched the window since. The fingerprint wasn't mine. It didn't match the position of my hand when I opened the door, and it was too high up to have come from me. The only conclusion I could draw was that it had appeared while I was driving. But that didn't make sense. No one had been in the car with me. I hadn't even opened that side of the car after I got in. The car had been locked the whole time. How was it possible that a fingerprint appeared on that window while I was driving? I reached out to touch the print, but something stopped me. I couldn't explain it. I just had this feeling, this instinct, that if I touched it, something would happen. Or maybe something would change. I don't know. But I didn't touch it. I backed away and went inside. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept racing, thinking about the drive, about the presence in the car, about the fingerprint. I told myself it was nothing, just some odd coincidence, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had happened. Something I didn't understand. The next morning, I went out to the car again. I wanted to check the window, maybe find some explanation for what I had seen. But when I got to the passenger side, the fingerprint was gone. It wasn't there. The glass was clean. I stood there for a while, just staring at it. I didn't know what to think. Had I imagined it? Had I really seen a fingerprint the night before, or had it been something my mind made up? I don't know. But I'll never forget the feeling of being watched in that car. The pressure in the air. The way it felt like someone was sitting right behind me, just out of sight. And that fingerprint. I can't explain it. It wasn't there when I got in the car, but it was there when I parked. And then, just as suddenly, it was gone. I don't know what it was, but I can't stop thinking about it. It's hard to explain what happened. Even now, as I try to write it down, I'm not sure I fully believe it. But I know what I experienced, and I don't know how to make sense of it. It doesn't feel real, but I swear it happened. It started last week. I was getting ready to head out for work. It was a regular morning, nothing out of the ordinary. I grabbed my bag, checked my phone, and then went to grab my wallet from the kitchen counter where I'd left it the night before. I do that every night. I place my wallet on the counter right by the door so I can grab it when I'm heading out. That day, I put it in my bag, zipped it up, and left. I didn't think much of it at the time. I was just getting through the morning routine, a little distracted by emails and messages on my phone. When I got to the car, I realized I didn't have my wallet. I thought maybe I'd left it in the kitchen again, or maybe it fell out of my bag when I grabbed something else. So I went back inside, checked the counter, but it wasn't there. It wasn't on the kitchen counter, it wasn't in my bag, and it wasn't in the car. I started to get a little frustrated. It's not like me to forget things like that. I checked my bag again, opened every pocket, even the hidden ones I never use, but there was no wallet. I couldn't figure out how I could have possibly left it at home when I was so sure I had put it in my bag earlier. I didn't have time to waste. I went to work without it. It wasn't ideal, but I figured I'd find it when I got home later. I spent the entire day thinking about it. The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that I had placed it in my bag. There was no other explanation. I never take my wallet out unless I need something from it, and I never leave it lying around the house. So, where was it? I retraced every step from that morning, but I didn't remember doing anything out of the ordinary. When I got home that night, I checked everywhere again, on the counter, inside my bag, under the couch cushions, and even in the car. I knew I had to have missed something, but I couldn't find it. It wasn't anywhere. And that's when I started to feel a little uneasy. I spent the next few days looking for it, hoping I would find it in a place I hadn't thought to check before. I was certain I hadn't misplaced it. Something about it didn't feel right. But no matter where I looked, it was gone. I even went back to the places I'd been that morning, thinking maybe I dropped it somewhere along the way. But the wallet never turned up. It was around the fourth day after I'd lost it when I started to feel odd. I don't know how else to explain it. Like something was out of place. Something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Then, just when I thought I was starting to lose my mind over it, I found the wallet. But the way I found it doesn't make sense. It was a Saturday morning. I woke up early, as I usually do, and decided to go out for coffee before I started my day. I left my apartment, stepped into the hallway, and noticed the door to my neighbor's apartment was slightly open. That was strange because she always kept it locked. I was about to knock and see if everything was okay when I noticed something strange out of the corner of my eye. On the floor in front of her door, there was something lying there. It was my wallet. I froze. My heart skipped a beat. There was no way. There was no way my wallet could be there. I hadn't been anywhere near that door in days, and I definitely hadn't been in her apartment. I walked over and picked it up, and to my surprise, it looked perfectly fine. There were no signs of it being damaged or moved around. It wasn't bent, torn, or scratched. It was as if it had been placed there just moments before. I felt a chill crawl up my spine as I stood there in the hallway, holding it. The whole situation didn't make any sense. I was sure it had been gone for days. I never left it at her place, and I certainly hadn't been anywhere near her door in that time. So how did it end up there? I knocked on her door to see if she had maybe found it and put it there, but there was no answer. The apartment was silent. I didn't know what to do, so I just left and went back inside. Once I was back in my apartment, I checked the wallet again, almost expecting to find something different, something that would explain how it had ended up there. But it was just like it had been before. Everything was exactly as I remembered it. The cards were in the same order, the cash was still there, even the receipt I had tucked in one of the pockets was there. I spent the next few hours trying to make sense of it all. How could my wallet be in a place I had never been? I hadn't even gone to my neighbor's apartment recently. And yet, there it was, just sitting there in the hallway like nothing had ever happened. I couldn't explain it. As the days passed, I started to get more and more unsettled. My mind kept replaying the moment when I found the wallet, and I kept wondering if I had somehow lost time, if I had maybe blacked out or something. Maybe I had been to that hallway and just didn't remember. But even that explanation didn't seem to make sense. I thought about asking my neighbor if she had seen anything strange, but I didn't want to look crazy. Besides, she had no reason to be involved in this, and I didn't want to make a big deal out of something that, honestly, felt like it might be all in my head. I still don't know how my wallet ended up there. I keep thinking back to that moment in the hallway, wondering if I missed something, if I was just somehow unaware of what was happening. But the more I try to reason it out, the more it doesn't make sense. I didn't go near her door. I didn't go anywhere near that place. So how could my wallet be there? It's been a week since it happened, and I still haven't figured it out. I've checked the wallet a dozen times, convinced I'd find something that would explain it all, but nothing's changed. I don't know what happened, but I know this. I can't shake the feeling that I'm missing something important. That somehow, in ways I can't understand, something isn't quite right. This is something I still can't explain, and honestly, it's been bothering me for weeks now. I've tried talking to a few friends about it, but they just laughed and said it was nothing. But I know what I saw, and I still can't shake the feeling that something happened that I'm not fully understanding. A few months ago, I went on vacation with my girlfriend. We've been planning the trip for a while, just a week in a quiet town near the coast. We wanted to disconnect, relax, and enjoy some peace and quiet. We weren't doing anything wild, just hiking in the mornings, eating good food, and taking photos to remember the trip. It was nice. Nothing out of the ordinary. Or at least, that's what I thought at the time. One day, we were at this small beach that was pretty remote, not many people around. We were the only ones at the shore, just walking along the sand and enjoying the ocean breeze. It wasn't anything too special, just another peaceful moment. We both had our phones out, taking pictures of the scenery and of each other. At one point, I asked her to take a picture of me standing near the water. The sun was setting, so the light was perfect, and I thought it would make for a nice shot. I stood there, arms out, smiling. She took the picture, and after that, we just continued walking along the beach. It wasn't until later that evening, when we were back in our hotel room and looking through the photos we'd taken, that something strange happened. We were scrolling through, laughing at the silly shots and deleting the blurry ones. Then I got to the photo of me standing near the water. I didn't think much of it at first, but then I noticed something in the background. A figure. At first, I thought maybe it was just a trick of the light. But no. It was a person. A man, standing in the distance behind me. I was sure I hadn't seen anyone else out there when I was taking the picture. There was no one around us, no one near the water, nothing but the two of us. We were the only people on that beach. I zoomed in to get a better look. It was hard to make out any details, just a dark shape in the distance. But I could tell it was a person. They were standing still, facing in my direction, but their face was turned away so I couldn't see it. They were wearing something dark, but it wasn't clear what. I don't know if it was a jacket or a shirt, but it looked out of place. The whole thing was strange. I asked my girlfriend if she had seen anyone else while we were on the beach. She looked at me like I was crazy. She said she hadn't seen anyone, that we had been alone the whole time. I showed her the picture, and she stared at it for a while before shrugging and saying it must have been a weird optical illusion. But I couldn't get rid of the feeling that something was wrong. The next day, I kept thinking about it. I checked the photo again. And again. But every time I looked, I still saw the same thing. The man standing there in the background, as if he had just appeared in the shot. I kept trying to think of an explanation. Maybe someone had been walking behind me when the picture was taken and I hadn't noticed. But that didn't make sense. We were far enough from the shoreline that there was no one else around. No one had come near us during the whole time we were there. We stayed at the beach for another hour after I took that photo, and there was no one else there. The whole time, I was looking around, paying attention to anyone who might have been nearby. But there was nothing. Just the two of us. So how did this person show up in the picture? I didn't know who to talk to about it. I didn't want to sound crazy, but I couldn't shake the thought that someone or something had been there, and I just hadn't noticed. I showed the picture to my best friend when I got home. He looked at it and just laughed, saying I was probably just seeing things or that it was some weird glitch in the photo. But I knew it wasn't that. There was something about the whole thing that felt off. I decided to go back through all the photos we had taken on the trip to see if I could spot anything else strange. I combed through every single one. There were plenty of pictures of us smiling, of sunsets, of the beach. But there was nothing unusual in any of them. Just that one photo. The one where the figure was standing in the background. I couldn't stop thinking about it. It wasn't just the man in the photo that bothered me. It was the fact that no one else remembered seeing him. Not my girlfriend, not anyone. I asked around, even called the hotel to see if anyone had been near the beach around the time we were there. But they said they hadn't had any other guests down there, and there were no other groups on the beach at the time. So how did this person get in the picture? Why didn't anyone else see them? It's been weeks since that trip, and I still can't explain it. I keep looking at the photo, trying to figure out what happened. Maybe it's some kind of camera glitch, I don't know. But every time I look at it, I feel a chill. It's like that figure is staring at me, watching me, even though I can't see their face. I don't know why they were in the picture, and I don't know how they got there. But it doesn't feel like a mistake. I've thought about showing the photo to someone else, maybe getting a second opinion. But every time I try, I hesitate. What if they think I'm crazy? What if I'm the only one who can see it? What if the person in the background is someone I was supposed to notice, but I didn't? I can't explain it, and I'm not sure I want to. But I can't shake the feeling that I'm missing something. That there's more to this picture than I'll ever understand. I don't know where to start, because this is something I can barely explain. I've been thinking about it for a while now, and the more I try to tell myself it's just my imagination, the more it doesn't feel like that. It's real, whatever it is, and it's been following me. It all started about 2 months ago. I remember the day clearly. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I had just finished running errands. Nothing special. I was heading home, planning to spend the evening alone. I was living in a small apartment at the time, on the second floor of an older building. It wasn't much, but it was quiet, and I liked it that way. I remember coming in, putting down my keys, and setting my bags down on the kitchen counter. The place felt empty, just as I expected. I went to the bathroom to wash my hands, and that's when it first happened. As I was standing in front of the mirror, I glanced over my shoulder. I don't know why. I just did. But there was nothing there. At least, not at first. I shrugged it off, telling myself I was just tired. The strange thing was, when I walked away from the bathroom, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. It felt like someone was there with me, just out of sight. I tried to ignore it, but the sensation stayed with me as I moved around the apartment. Every time I walked through a room, I felt something behind me, as if it was following my movements. At first, I thought maybe I was just being paranoid. The place wasn't exactly the most well lit, and sometimes my mind would play tricks on me, especially when I was alone. But this was different. It wasn't just the usual feeling of being alone in a quiet space. It felt like something or someone was actually there, watching. I turned around quickly a few times, hoping to catch whatever was there, but each time, there was nothing. No one. No movement. Nothing to explain the feeling. I walked into my bedroom, and I swear, I saw something shift in the corner of my eye. A shadow. But when I looked, there was nothing. I tried to push it out of my head. I was probably just overthinking it, I told myself. But as the evening wore on, the sensation only grew stronger. It was like a presence that followed me everywhere. Every room I went into, every corner I turned, it was there, just behind me. I kept glancing over my shoulder, but no matter how many times I turned around, no one was there. That night, I lay in bed, the covers pulled up to my chin, and I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at the ceiling, waiting for the feeling to fade, but it never did. It was like something was lingering just outside my vision, something I couldn't quite catch. The next day, I thought maybe it was just a weird, one-time thing. Maybe I was just too stressed out or exhausted. But the feeling didn't go away. It stayed with me, even when I went to work the next day. As I walked down the hallway to my office, I felt that same presence behind me. When I turned around, there was nothing. But the feeling didn't disappear. It just hung there, like a weight on my shoulders. I tried to brush it off, but it didn't help. Every time I was alone, the sensation would return. I'd be sitting at my desk, minding my own business, when I'd feel it. The shadow, following me. It would stay in my peripheral vision, just out of reach, and every time I tried to look directly at it, it would vanish. I began to feel like I was losing my mind. How could I explain it to anyone? How could I tell people I felt like a shadow was following me around, but when I turned to look, there was nothing there. It sounded crazy, even to me. One evening, after work, I decided to try something. I set up my phone in the hallway of my apartment, facing towards the living room. I didn't know why, but I thought if I could catch whatever it was on camera, I could prove it to myself. I left the phone recording as I walked down the hall. I went through the motions, moving from room to room, glancing over my shoulder every few steps. I didn't feel anything different, but I kept expecting to see something out of the corner of my eye. The camera kept recording. When I played it back later, there was nothing. No shadow. No movement. Nothing. I watched the footage again, trying to find something, anything that would explain the feeling I had. But there was nothing. Just the normal stillness of the apartment. The air felt heavier now, though. Like whatever I had hoped to capture wasn't going to show up. Days turned into weeks, and the sensation never left. It became part of my routine, this constant feeling of being watched. Every time I was alone, whether it was at home or in the office, I could feel it. The shadow. It would be behind me, lingering just beyond my sight. I tried to talk to a friend about it once. I told them how I felt like I was being followed by something that wasn't there. At first, they laughed, probably thinking it was a joke. But when they saw how serious I was, they stopped laughing. They said I might be stressed, that I should take some time off or talk to a professional. It was comforting, in a way, to hear that it might just be a mental thing. But deep down, I didn't believe it. The feeling was real. It wasn't in my head. The worst part is that it never showed up on camera. No matter how many times I set my phone up or tried to capture it, it wasn't there. I'd see it with my own eyes, but the moment I tried to record it, it would vanish. No matter how still I stood, no matter how carefully I tried to catch it in the frame, there was nothing. I've stopped trying to catch it on camera. I don't think it's something that can be caught that way. But it's still here. I can feel it. When I'm alone at night, or when I'm walking through a crowded room, I feel it behind me, just out of sight. I turn, expecting to see something, anything, but every time, it's empty. Just the quiet, empty space around me. I'm not sure what this is. I'm not sure if I'll ever be able to explain it. But I know this feeling. It's not just in my head. It's real. Something's there, following me. And I can't escape it. I'm still trying to make sense of what happened, even though I don't know if I ever will. This whole thing started with a dream, just a regular, ordinary dream at first, but it turned into something so real that I'm still not sure if it was all just a weird coincidence or something else entirely. To this day, I can't shake the feeling that there's more to it than I understand. It happened about 3 weeks ago. I was living in a small town at the time, just minding my own business. It was a Tuesday night, I remember that much. I had just finished a long day at work and was exhausted, so I went to bed early, hoping for a good night's rest. I don't usually remember my dreams, but this one was different. It started out like any other, nothing out of the ordinary, just the usual drifting off to sleep and being pulled into some random scene. But then, something changed. I was standing in a busy cafe, one I didn't recognize. It wasn't a big, fancy place, but it had a cozy vibe, wooden tables, soft lighting. I could smell coffee, the kind that made you want to close your eyes and take a deep breath just to enjoy the warmth. I was standing in line, waiting to order, when I saw him. A man. He was sitting at one of the tables near the window, reading a book. He looked up for a second, as if he sensed me looking at him, and our eyes met. He smiled. It wasn't a big, welcoming smile, just a small one, like he knew something I didn't. But I didn't think anything of it at the time. I turned away and placed my order, then sat down at a table by the door. For the next few minutes, I watched him. He didn't do much, just sat there, turning the pages of his book. But there was something about him that stuck with me. The way he looked, the way he moved, like he was aware of everything happening around him. I couldn't place it. It was a quiet sort of intensity, like he was studying everyone else in the room without even trying. I didn't speak to him. I didn't have a reason to. But I remember thinking, as I sat there in that dream, that I knew I'd seen him before. I couldn't remember when or where, but it felt like our paths had crossed somewhere in the past. I woke up the next morning with a strange feeling in my chest, like something was missing. I hadn't thought much of the dream until I found myself still thinking about it later that day. Something about the man in the cafe felt too real, like he was someone I was supposed to recognize, like he had been a part of my life in some way. I shook it off as just another weird dream. Everyone has strange dreams sometimes, right? But then, things started to get odd. The next day, I was at the grocery store. I was walking down the aisle, looking for some cereal when I turned the corner and bumped right into someone. I stepped back, apologized, and when I looked up, my breath caught in my throat. It was him. The same man from my dream. I didn't recognize him right away, but there was no mistaking it. His face was exactly the same, his hair was the same, even the way he stood with his hands in his pockets was the same. Everything about him screamed familiarity, like I'd seen him 100 times, but I had no idea who he was. I tried to shake it off. It wasn't possible. I had just seen him in a dream, that's all. But how could I not remember someone who looked exactly like that? It wasn't a coincidence. I could feel my heart start to race, and I wanted to say something, but I didn't know what to say. He just looked at me, his face soft, but there was that same little smile. That smile from the cafe. The same smile from my dream. He nodded as if acknowledging me, then walked off down the aisle, disappearing into the crowd. I stood there, frozen for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my cereal, but I couldn't focus on anything after that. All I could think about was how I had seen him before, except not in real life. I had seen him in my dream. I left the store, my mind reeling. How could that be? How could the man from my dream be standing in front of me, acting like it was nothing? I had never seen him before, not in real life. I was sure of it. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a random coincidence. Over the next few days, I started to notice him everywhere. It wasn't as if he was following me, but I'd see him in places I didn't expect. I saw him walking down the street as I was driving by. I saw him sitting in a cafe across the street from my apartment. I even saw him at the park, reading that same book. Every time, he didn't approach me, but I couldn't ignore the feeling that he was always just out of reach, as if he were waiting for me to notice. The worst part was, I couldn't shake the feeling that I should know him. But I didn't. I had never met him before. I tried to remember any time in my life when I might have come across someone who looked like him, but I came up with nothing. His presence felt familiar, but there was no concrete memory attached to it. It was like he was a part of my life that I had forgotten about, a person who was meant to be there, but I couldn't place him. One night, I decided I needed answers. I had been avoiding him for days, but it was driving me crazy. I walked into the cafe where I'd seen him in my dream, hoping maybe he'd be there. And, sure enough, he was sitting at the same table by the window, reading his book. This time, I didn't hesitate. I walked up to him and asked if we'd met before. He looked up from his book, that same small smile playing on his lips, and for a moment, I thought he was going to say something. But then he didn't. He just looked at me, his eyes cold and knowing, and said, "You'll remember soon enough." Then, without another word, he closed his book, stood up, and walked out of the cafe. I've been thinking about that ever since. What did he mean by that? You'll remember soon enough? Remember what? It felt like he knew something I didn't. Like there was a reason we were supposed to meet, but I couldn't remember it. Since then, I haven't seen him again. I don't know if I will. But I can't shake the feeling that this isn't over. That dream wasn't just a random thing. It felt too real. And that man? I feel like he's out there, somewhere, waiting for me to remember. But I don't know what. And I don't know why. I don't know if I want to find out. I've been debating whether or not to share this because, well, I don't know what to make of it myself. Part of me wants to believe it's all in my head, that I'm just imagining things or that I've been too stressed out recently. But the other part of me knows something strange is going on. Something I can't explain. It started a few weeks ago, around the end of September. I live in a small apartment, nothing fancy, just a one-bedroom place in a quiet building. It's comfortable, and I like it that way, nothing too big or complicated. I'm the type of person who likes order and routine. Everything has its place. At least, I thought it did. I noticed it the first time on a Thursday evening. I had just finished making dinner, and I was sitting on the couch, watching TV. I didn't really pay attention to much around me at first, but when I got up to grab my phone from the coffee table, I noticed something odd. A pen I always keep on the table was no longer where I'd left it. It was a small, black pen, just a regular ballpoint, and I always put it in the same spot right next to my remote. But that night, it wasn't there. I searched around the table for a moment, thinking maybe I'd knocked it off without realizing it, but it was nowhere to be found. It was strange because I was pretty sure I hadn't moved it. Still, I shrugged it off. Maybe I just didn't remember moving it. It wasn't a big deal, I thought. Could have been me, after all. The next day, I woke up to an even stranger occurrence. I had left my book on the kitchen counter the night before, the one I'd been reading before bed. When I went into the kitchen to make coffee, the book was in a completely different spot on the table next to the window. I know I hadn't moved it. I would have remembered. At this point, I started to feel a little uneasy, but again, I brushed it off. I told myself maybe I had picked it up without thinking, or maybe it had somehow slid over in the night. But it didn't feel like that. The feeling in my chest was something else, something I couldn't shake. The whole thing was starting to feel like a pattern, and it was a pattern I couldn't quite explain. Over the next few days, the odd shifts in position kept happening. It wasn't just pens or books. I started noticing other things too. My keys, which I always leave on the entryway table, would sometimes be moved to the couch or even the kitchen counter. A pair of sunglasses I kept in the drawer would be sitting on the coffee table, even though I never took them out. My shoes, my right shoe, specifically, would end up facing the door while I had left it facing the closet. Each time, I'd tell myself it was just me being careless, that I was simply forgetting where I'd put things. But the more it happened, the more I began to feel like there was something I wasn't seeing. I didn't have anyone over, so it couldn't be someone else moving the objects around. I was alone in the apartment almost all the time. I even started paying extra attention to where I'd put things, making sure I'd remember. I'd leave a pen in the exact same place, and by the time I returned, it would be somewhere else. It was as though something, or someone, was deliberately moving things around when it wasn't looking. But I didn't know how to explain it. A week went by, and the shifting continued. At one point, I tried an experiment. I set a glass on the kitchen counter and left it there all day, marking the spot with a small piece of tape under it. I wanted to see if it was my mind playing tricks on me or if something really was happening. When I came home that evening, the glass was no longer where I'd left it. It had moved just an inch to the left. And the tape? It was still there, right where I had placed it. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I started feeling a sense of dread whenever I walked into a room. The shifting objects were no longer just an inconvenience or a series of forgetful moments, they were starting to feel deliberate. It was like someone or something was watching me, moving things when I wasn't around, leaving me little clues I couldn't explain. That's when I started noticing the pattern. The objects weren't just being moved randomly. There seemed to be a rhythm to it. The pen was always moved in the afternoon. The book was always moved after I'd finished reading, never before. My keys were shifted every 2 or 3 days, and always to the same spots, places that seemed insignificant, but somehow stood out. My sunglasses, those always ended up on the coffee table just after I'd been in the kitchen. It was almost as if something, or someone, was studying me, watching my habits and waiting for the perfect moment to move things around, to let me know it was there. The thought made my skin crawl. A few days ago, I decided to try something different. I took a picture of the living room, focusing on the small items I'd been noticing. I wanted to have a record of how things looked before I left for work. I even left my phone on the table as I left the apartment, thinking I'd have some kind of proof, maybe a time-lapse video of the place changing while I was gone. When I got home that evening, I checked the photo. Nothing looked out of place, but when I checked the live feed from my phone's camera, I saw something that made my heart stop. A shadow, barely visible, moving across the table just after I left. It was so faint that I almost convinced myself it was a trick of the light, but it wasn't. It was there. Moving. I watched the footage a few more times, hoping I was just imagining things. But no, there it was. The shadow wasn't mine. I hadn't been in the room. The room was empty when I left. But something was there, something moving around on the table, shifting things in the exact pattern I'd seen before. That was the moment I knew I wasn't just being forgetful. Something was in my apartment. Something was following me, watching me, and moving things around. I don't know what it wants, or why it's doing this. I haven't been able to sleep well since then, and I've been trying to make sense of it all. I've checked the locks on all the doors and windows, but nothing is out of place. Everything is secure. But the feeling is still there. The feeling that something is always one step behind me, waiting for the next moment to move something just out of sight. I'm not sure what to do anymore. The more I try to ignore it, the more it feels like whatever's here is getting closer. The pattern is too perfect, too deliberate to be a coincidence. And every time I turn around, it's there. Moving something else. Something small. But it's never far enough away. It's always right there. It started a few weeks ago, right after I went to this seminar about personal development and mindfulness. I didn't think much of it at the time. I figured it would just be one of those motivational things you attend because you need to hear a little push or some advice on life. To be honest, I went because a friend invited me. She thought it would be good for both of us, and since I had nothing better to do that weekend, I agreed. The seminar was held at a conference hall just outside of town. The place was packed, but it wasn't anything too fancy. The speaker, a guy named Richard, was one of those charismatic, upbeat people. You know the type, always smiling, always talking about how to unlock your potential and achieve your dreams. His talk lasted for hours, and most of it was a mix of personal anecdotes and generic advice on thinking positively. I didn't take much away from it. It was mostly just a lot of motivational fluff, but I didn't mind. I wasn't expecting a life-changing experience. But then something weird happened when I was heading out. I had grabbed a program booklet from the back of the room before I left. I remember I didn't think much about it, just a brochure, some flyers, maybe a couple of quotes from the seminar. But as I was walking out to my car, I flipped through it. That's when I saw it. There were a few pages written in what looked like a foreign language. It wasn't just any language, though. It was something I had never seen before. I mean, it didn't even look like any of the languages I could recognize. I've taken Spanish and French in school, but this was something else. The characters were strange, curved in a way that I couldn't place. I'm no linguist, but I couldn't figure out if it was a completely different script or something else entirely. I felt a weird sense of recognition, like the shapes on the paper were somehow familiar, but I had no idea how. My head was a bit foggy from the long day at the seminar, and I assumed I was just tired or imagining things. I didn't think too much about it at first. But when I sat down in my car, I found myself staring at those pages again, even though I had no idea what any of the words meant. But for some reason, they didn't seem foreign at all. The next day, when I sat down at my desk to start working, something strange happened. I had this urge to go back to that booklet. It was almost like I had to, like there was something pulling me to look at those pages again. So, I took it out of my bag and started reading the foreign text. This time, though, something was different. I could understand it. I know it sounds impossible, but I could read it fluently. And it wasn't just a couple of words here and there. I was reading entire sentences like I had studied this language for years. The characters were no longer strange. I could translate them into something that made sense. It was like my brain had unlocked the ability to understand it instantly. I'm not even sure how to explain it. I had never seen this language before in my life, but there I was, reading it, understanding it, even thinking in it. I couldn't stop. I kept reading, feeling more and more connected to the text, almost like I had known it all along. There were no pauses in my reading, no confusion. It wasn't just that I understood the words, I was interpreting the ideas behind them too, like it was second nature. I went through the whole booklet that morning. I even started writing out the translations in my notebook, but I didn't need to. Everything made perfect sense in my head. It was around lunchtime when I snapped out of it. I put the booklet down, feeling weirdly exhausted, like I'd been concentrating too hard. But also, kind of exhilarated. I didn't understand how this could be happening. It was one thing to understand a language you study for a while, but this? I hadn't studied anything remotely close to this. I tried to shake it off. Maybe I was just imagining it, right? Maybe it was just a weird coincidence. So, I put the booklet away and didn't think about it for the rest of the day. But when I woke up the next morning, the sensation was still there. This time, I went straight for the booklet again. It wasn't like I had to force myself to understand the language either. It was just automatic. I could look at the text and immediately know what it said, every single word. I could even speak it, though I hadn't heard a single sound from this language before. I don't know how to explain it. It was like I was just speaking it naturally, without any effort. I started looking up online resources about languages, trying to find any trace of the script or any word that even remotely resembled the one in the booklet. But I couldn't find anything. The more I searched, the more I realized how impossible this all was. There was no language like it. That's when I started feeling, I don't know, unsettled. I didn't tell anyone, not even my closest friends. I didn't want to sound crazy. I was trying to make sense of it on my own, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that something had changed. Something was different about me now. It was like I had tapped into some hidden part of my mind that I didn't know existed. I couldn't even remember when it had all started or why I had even been able to understand the language in the first place. It was when I tried writing a message in this language that things took an even stranger turn. I had written a short sentence, just testing it out. But when I looked at the paper, the words weren't the same as what I had written. They had shifted, changed into a completely different script. The characters had morphed into something else entirely, something I hadn't seen before. I froze. My heart started pounding in my chest, and my head began to spin. How could the writing change like that? I hadn't made any changes. It was as if the language had evolved in front of me, shifting and rearranging itself into something new. I don't know what's going on, and I still don't have answers. I've tried looking for some kind of explanation, but I haven't found anything that fits. I still can't figure out how I can read and speak a language I've never learned. It feels like it's always been there, like I was supposed to know it all along. I've tried to ignore it, to let it go, but I can't. The more I think about it, the more I'm convinced something happened at that seminar, something triggered it, something I can't explain. It feels like I'm holding onto a secret that I don't fully understand. It's like the language is calling to me, waiting for me to do something with it. But I don't know what. I don't know how to stop it either. I haven't looked at the booklet since that night, and I haven't tried speaking the language again. But I'm not sure I can avoid it for much longer. Something is pulling me back toward it. Something is pushing me to understand it more, to use it, even though I don't know what it all means. I don't know how it happened, but I do know that I've been changed by it. Something in me clicked that day at the seminar, and now I can't go back. I'm still not sure what to make of what happened. I don't even know if I should be worried or relieved. But the whole situation has been gnawing at me, and I've thought about it so many times that I finally decided to just write it down. It all started back in April. I had this necklace, nothing extravagant, just a simple silver pendant with a small sapphire. It wasn't worth much, but it had belonged to my grandmother. She passed away a few years ago, and I'd always kept it close. She had worn it all her life, and when she died, she gave it to me. I wore it every day, almost like a constant reminder of her, of the days I spent with her when I was little. It wasn't fancy, like I said. Just a small blue stone with silver around it, but I never took it off. I had gotten used to the weight of it on my neck, the way it felt when I reached up to touch it or when it brushed against my skin. One evening, at the end of a busy week, I was getting ready for bed. I had a long day running errands, meeting up with friends, and I was just exhausted. As I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, getting ready to wash my face, I realized the necklace wasn't around my neck. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I could have sworn I'd put it on that morning. I checked the bathroom counter, then the sink. I looked under the towel on the rack and even checked the floor, thinking maybe it had slipped off while I was getting dressed. Nothing. At this point, I thought maybe I was just too tired and hadn't realized I'd taken it off. So, I went through my whole routine, brushed my teeth, washed my face, and went to bed, telling myself I'd find it the next day. It wasn't like I could lose something that important. But the next morning, when I checked again, it still wasn't there. I searched through all my drawers, my nightstand, the closet, under the bed, and even in the kitchen, anywhere I thought I might have misplaced it. I thought I was just being careless, that I'd left it somewhere and forgotten. Days passed, and it was as if the necklace had vanished into thin air. I retraced my steps, checked every nook and cranny, and I even asked my roommate if they had seen it. But they hadn't. I spent hours looking for it, but it was like it had never existed. It was incredibly frustrating. I'd lost things before, sure, but this was different. This necklace meant something. It wasn't just another piece of jewelry. It had been a part of me for years, and now it was gone. I even started to panic a little. I couldn't imagine losing it, especially after everything that had happened with my grandmother. It just didn't make sense. After a couple of weeks, I gave up searching. I didn't want to admit it, but I started to think I might never find it. I couldn't stop thinking about the necklace, though. It consumed me. It felt like a hole was left where it should have been, and every time I caught a glimpse of my reflection in a window or mirror, it felt like something was missing. I didn't tell anyone, not even my mom. She would have been upset, and I didn't want to add to her worries. So, I just kept going about my days, trying to get over it. But the loss lingered. Months passed. I had mostly accepted that it was gone, but I never stopped looking, even though I wasn't actively searching anymore. Every now and then, I checked places where I'd looked 100 times before, just hoping against hope that it had been sitting there all along. But there was nothing. Then, one morning in late July, something strange happened. I had just finished cleaning my apartment. It was a Saturday, and I'd spent most of the day getting rid of clutter. I was getting ready to settle down for a quiet evening when I noticed something odd. I had just finished vacuuming, and while putting the vacuum away, I happened to glance down at the floor near my bookshelf. At first, I thought it was just dust, a little shadow from the light, or maybe a trick of my eyes. But when I looked closer, I saw it. There, on the floor right in front of the bookshelf, was the necklace. I nearly collapsed. My heart stopped, and for a second, I thought I was imagining it. It couldn't be. I had looked there so many times before. I had checked that exact spot, that area, a dozen times over the past few months. And yet, there it was, just lying there, as if it had never been gone. I picked it up slowly, almost in disbelief. It was exactly how I remembered it. The same silver chain, the same sapphire pendant. No scratches, no damage. It was like it had never left. I sat down on the floor, holding it in my hands, trying to process what had just happened. There was no way I could have missed it. I mean, I've vacuumed that spot at least 5 times since I lost it, and I've checked under the bookshelf, in between the cracks, everywhere. It wasn't there. It couldn't have been. But now, it was. I thought maybe I'd overlooked it, but that didn't make sense. If it had been there all along, I would have found it. There was no way it could have been hidden somewhere where I couldn't see it, not when I'd searched every inch of the room. For a moment, I just stared at the necklace, trying to figure out what happened. I checked the rest of the apartment to see if it had somehow moved around, if I'd somehow missed it elsewhere. But no, it was only in that one place, on the floor near the bookshelf. I don't know what to make of it. I can't explain how the necklace ended up there, or why it reappeared when it did. It didn't make any sense. I thought I had lost it forever, and then, out of nowhere, it was back. The only thing I can say for sure is that it feels like something I can't quite understand. I don't know how it happened, but I'm not sure I want to. The whole experience left me with a strange sense of unease, even as I was happy to have it back. I still don't have an answer for what happened, but I guess, in the end, I can say I have the necklace back. It's almost like it was returned to me by something or someone that didn't want me to lose it after all. But no matter how much I think about it, I can't shake the feeling that I'll never fully understand why it vanished in the first place, or why it came back when it did. All I know is that I've stopped looking for it now. It's in my jewelry box, sitting there just like it always was. But I don't think I'll ever forget how it disappeared. This happened a few months ago, but it still doesn't make sense to me. I keep trying to piece together what happened, but the more I think about it, the less I understand. It started on a Saturday evening, not long after the sun had set. The kind of time when everything feels a little quieter, and the house is darker than it is during the day. I was at home by myself, just going through the usual routine. I was tidying up the kitchen, putting some dishes away, when I first heard it. At first, I thought it was just the wind or something outside. I just moved into this new place, and the house was still settling, making noises I wasn't used to. But then I heard it again, my name. Clear as day. Hey, Gavin. It wasn't a whisper or anything faint. It was loud enough to make me stop what I was doing. I remember I froze for a second, turning to look around the room, thinking maybe someone had come over, maybe a friend who I didn't hear knock. But no one was there. I was alone. I called out, "Hello," but the house was silent. Just the hum of the fridge and the soft sound of the wind outside. I felt a little strange but brushed it off, thinking maybe I'd imagined it. I was tired, and sometimes when you're tired, your mind plays tricks on you. So, I just went back to what I was doing. About 10 minutes later, I heard it again. Gavin, but this time, it sounded like it was coming from the hallway. I could feel my heart start to race, my skin tingling with unease. I slowly put the dish in my hand down and stood there, listening. The house was quiet again. There was no one in the hallway. I thought maybe I was hearing things again, but it was different this time. It wasn't just the sound of my name. It was like the voice was too familiar, like I could almost recognize it, but I couldn't quite place it. Like it sounded like me. I shook it off and went to check the hallway, but there was nothing there. I felt a little foolish, but I told myself I was just imagining things. Still, the voice had been so clear. It hadn't been a mistake. It was real. I went back to the kitchen and tried to focus on what I was doing. But then, it happened again, but this time, it was different. It came from the living room. I was standing by the sink when I heard it again, loud and clear. Gavin. My heart skipped a beat, and I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It was my voice. But it wasn't me. I couldn't help myself. I turned to the living room, and once again, there was no one there. I checked every corner of the room, peeked behind the couch, and even looked out the windows, thinking maybe someone was trying to play a prank on me. But there was no one. Just the empty, dimly lit room staring back at me. I felt a shiver run down my spine. At this point, I was no longer trying to convince myself that I was just hearing things. I was aware of the fact that something strange was happening. I stood there for a moment, wondering if I should leave, but I didn't want to overreact. I walked back into the kitchen, trying to steady my nerves. I was going to finish what I was doing, and then I was going to leave. I couldn't stay in a house that felt wrong. But as I reached for the dish towel, I heard it again. This time, it was coming from upstairs. Gavin. The voice was unmistakable. I don't know how to explain it, but it sounded exactly like my voice, yet it wasn't mine. I couldn't see how that was possible. I couldn't even understand how it was happening. Why was it moving around the house? How could it sound so much like me, but not be me? I stood frozen in place, listening. My hands trembled slightly as I gripped the towel. I wanted to scream or call someone, but something told me not to. Something told me that if I reacted, it would make whatever this was worse. So, I did nothing. I walked upstairs, feeling a chill in the air, like the temperature had dropped. The upstairs hallway was dark. The only light was from the faint glow of the kitchen below, but it barely reached the top of the stairs. The house felt empty, silent, as if I were the only one there, but the voice kept repeating my name. Gavin. It wasn't coming from one place anymore. It was coming from all over the house, from every direction. It sounded like it was coming from behind the walls, from the corners of the ceiling, from just outside the window. And it was still my voice, but it wasn't. I didn't understand. It made no sense. I stood there in the hallway, listening to the voice echoing around me. It was impossible to know which direction it was coming from. I couldn't decide whether to run out of the house or just sit down and try to think through what was going on. I was too scared to leave, too scared to move. And in that silence, the voice kept coming, more insistent now. Gavin. After what felt like hours, I finally turned and bolted out of the house. I didn't care about anything anymore, not the dishes, not the noise, nothing. I just wanted to get away. I locked the door behind me, my breath coming fast and ragged. I spent the night at a friend's house, too shaken to even think about going back. But when I returned the next day, everything was as it should be. The house was still. No strange noises, no mysterious voices. Just the quiet that I had known before. But I couldn't forget what had happened. The voice, my name, the feeling that something was watching me from all directions. I even started to wonder if I was losing my mind. I tried not to think about it, but I couldn't stop. The worst part is that I haven't heard the voice since that night, but I feel it sometimes. Not like I hear it anymore, but like it's still here. It's almost as if the air around me feels different now, like there's something present, something I can't explain. Every now and then, I'll be sitting alone, and I'll feel a sense of something. Like the house isn't empty. Like someone is still there, watching. waiting. I don't know what happened that night. I don't know what caused the voice or why it sounded like me. I don't know if I imagined it or if something really was in the house with me. All I know is that I can't shake the feeling that whatever it was, it's still out there, and it knows my name. It's hard to explain, but I've never been able to shake the feeling. I moved into a new house a few months ago, and from the very first moment I stepped inside, there was something off. At first, I just thought I was imagining it, but the longer I've been here, the more certain I am that I've been in this house before. Not just been here, but lived here. I know that sounds ridiculous. I've never been here before. I had never even seen the house until I toured it with the realtor. But there are times when I walk into certain rooms, or stand in front of the fireplace, or even glance at a certain corner, and it's like I know it. Like I've been standing there before, years ago, in a life I can't remember. I guess it started the first day I moved in. The house had been empty for a while. The previous owners had moved out a few months before, and there wasn't much left behind except some old furniture that had been covered up with sheets. I was mostly focused on unpacking and getting things organized, but when I stepped into the living room, it hit me. It wasn't like a flash of recognition, not like seeing an old friend. It was more subtle, like a familiarity that crept up on me. The furniture, the layout, even the way the light fell through the windows. It was all right. Not in a "this is how I want my house" kind of way, but in a deep, unsettling way. I remember standing there, frozen for a few seconds, my heart racing. It was like something deep in my gut was telling me that I knew this place, but my brain was fighting it. I tried to push it away, thinking I was just tired from the move. I moved into the kitchen after that, but the feeling only got stronger. The layout was simple, nothing special, but when I stood in front of the sink, I could swear I had done it before, washed dishes, looked out the window. The counter seemed familiar, the fridge, even the drawers. I can't explain it. It wasn't a sense of déjà vu, it was more like I had lived here, like I had cooked in this kitchen countless times. I shrugged it off. There was no way I could have lived here before. I checked the house's history, made sure there weren't any big surprises, but nothing stood out. The house was relatively new, only about 10 years old, and it didn't seem like anything odd had happened here. The real oddness started a week later. I was unpacking some of the old boxes, putting things away when I found an old photograph. It was a picture of the house, taken years ago. I had no idea how it had ended up in one of my boxes, and it didn't seem familiar at first. But when I looked closer, my heart skipped. There it was. The same living room, the same furniture, but the people in the picture, no one I recognized. But the feeling was there. The furniture, the way it was arranged, the exact position of everything. It felt wrong. I had never been in the house before, so how could I feel this way? After that, it was like everything began to add up. There were small things, details that shouldn't matter, but for some reason, they did. The way the stairs creaked when I climbed them, the way the door to the bathroom always made a soft click when it closed, the pattern in the wallpaper in the hallway that seemed to trigger something deep inside me. All of it felt so right. It wasn't just familiarity, it was like I had been living in this house for years. I tried to talk to my friends about it. I even mentioned it to my sister, who had come over one afternoon. She looked at me like I was crazy. "It's just a house," she said. "You're probably just getting used to it." But I knew it wasn't just that. It was deeper than that. It was a feeling that something in this house was tied to me in a way that I couldn't explain. The real turning point came one night when I was in bed. I had just gotten under the covers, the house was quiet, and the lights were off. I closed my eyes, ready to fall asleep when I heard the soft sound of footsteps upstairs. I sat up, startled. I thought maybe it was the wind or something settling, but it sounded like footsteps. Slowly, deliberately, as if someone were walking down the hallway. I froze. I told myself it was just the house creaking, maybe an old board or something, but then it happened again. The footsteps. Slow, echoing in the quiet of the house. I tried to ignore it, tried to convince myself I was just being paranoid, but I couldn't. I got out of bed and walked to the stairs, listening. The footsteps stopped when I reached the bottom of the stairs. My heart pounded in my chest, and I felt an overwhelming urge to go upstairs, to see who was up there. But at the same time, I was terrified. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, but no one came. No one was there. I checked every room upstairs, looking in closets, under the bed, even behind the shower curtain. Everything was as it should be. No one. Nothing. But the sense of familiarity, of knowing every inch of this house, didn't go away. I was still shaken up by that night, but the feeling didn't stop. If anything, it grew stronger. The more time I spent here, the more certain I became that this house was familiar to me, like I had lived here before. But I never had. I checked the layout of the house again, the floor plans. There was nothing unusual about it. Nothing that should have made it feel like home. It started to get unsettling when I began dreaming about the house. They weren't normal dreams, they were vivid, almost like memories. I would dream about sitting at the kitchen table, drinking coffee, staring out the window at the same trees that I saw every day. I'd dream about walking up the stairs at night, hearing the floorboards creak beneath me, and going to bed in that same room. I would dream of the very same furniture, the same photographs on the walls, the same feeling of quiet peace, like everything was right where it should be. But I had never been there before. The most unsettling part, though, was when I started to recognize the rooms, the specific way things were arranged, without ever having seen it in real life. There was this one chair in the living room, an old armchair that I swore had been in my grandmother's house, even though I knew I'd never seen it before I moved in. The way the light reflected off the glass vase on the shelf, the old rug by the front door, every little detail seemed familiar. At this point, I started to feel like I was losing my mind. Maybe I was imagining things, or maybe it was just the stress of moving into a new house. But the feelings wouldn't stop. They kept coming back, stronger and stronger. It was like I had lived this life before, walked these hallways before, sat in this kitchen and watched the sunlight move across the floor in the morning. But how could that be possible? I still don't know. Maybe it's all just coincidence. Maybe it's the way houses are designed, how they have a certain feel when you live in them. But whatever it is, I can't shake the feeling that I've been here before. And I don't know why, but part of me feels like I always will. I don't really know where to start, but what happened to me a few weeks ago has been on my mind constantly. I've tried to make sense of it, to tell myself that it was just some odd experience, nothing more than a random moment that doesn't really mean anything. But the more I think about it, the more I realize that I can't shake the feeling that something strange happened that day. It was a regular afternoon. The kind of day you don't think twice about. I was walking down a street near my apartment, a street I've passed by hundreds of times. I usually don't pay much attention to it, just a street with shops and cars parked along the curb. There's nothing extraordinary about it. Nothing to make you stop and look around. I wasn't thinking about anything in particular when it happened. I was just walking, my hands in my pockets, maybe thinking about what to make for dinner or what I needed to do later. But suddenly, out of nowhere, it hit me. A memory. At first, it was like a thought that didn't quite fit, like I was remembering something out of place. But then it got sharper, clearer. It was a memory of that same street. Only, it wasn't now. It was as though I had walked down that same path, but 20 years ago. I swear it felt like I had seen the exact same buildings, the same sidewalk, the same trees lining the street, but the whole scene was different. The cars were older, the people walking around were dressed in clothes from a different time. There were no new cafes or stores. Everything seemed simpler, more familiar, in a way that felt strange and unsettling. I froze for a second, just standing there on the sidewalk. It was like a wave of recognition swept over me, only it wasn't from this time. I could see myself as a kid, maybe 8 or 9 years old, wearing clothes I used to wear, walking down that street with a balloon in my hand. I could even remember the sound of the street, the way the old buildings seemed to stretch high above me, how the shadows looked a little longer, a little darker, than they do now. It felt like I had been there before, like I had walked that street as a child, but the odd thing was, I knew I hadn't. I've lived in this city for a while, and I know every street, every corner, like the back of my hand. So there was no way that I could have walked down this exact street when I was a kid. It's not even a street that I used to live near or that I spend much time on. And yet, in that moment, I could see myself there. It was like I had just stepped out of a dream or something. I tried to shake it off. Maybe it was just a weird moment of déjà vu or some random connection my brain made between something in my past and what I was seeing now. But it didn't go away. The memory kept coming back, flashing before my eyes in bits and pieces. I could feel the weight of the memory in my chest, a strange heaviness that made me uneasy. It felt so real, like I was caught in 2 different times at once. I started walking again, trying to push it out of my mind. But the more I walked, the more it felt like that memory was still with me, hovering just out of reach. It was almost like I could hear the laughter of a child, see their small hand holding onto a balloon. But when I looked around, no one was there. The street looked the same as it always did, busy, modern, crowded with people going about their day, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That I wasn't just walking here now, I had already walked here, a long time ago, when I was someone else. I know it sounds crazy, but I started to feel like I was losing touch with reality. Like I had been placed in a scene that didn't quite belong to me, a scene from a life that wasn't mine, but at the same time, was. It was disorienting. I kept walking, more out of instinct than anything else, trying to push the thoughts aside. But every time I glanced at a building or a street lamp or the faded storefronts, the flashes came back. The memory of that other time, of walking here with the feeling of being a child again, kept creeping up like an itch I couldn't scratch. I started to wonder if I was just imagining the whole thing. But it felt too real. I've never had a memory like that before, something so vivid, so complete, so detached from anything I had actually experienced. I reached a corner, and there was this old cafe I passed by all the time. It wasn't anything special, just another coffee shop with a few tables outside, the usual crowd of people hanging out. But as I approached it, the memory came back again, stronger than ever. I could see myself, standing in front of that very cafe, holding a chocolate bar, the sun high in the sky, feeling like I was there with my mother, maybe even hearing her laugh. But the weirdest thing? The cafe was completely different in my memory. It wasn't a coffee shop back then. It was a small, old bakery, with a little sign hanging outside, the kind that was barely visible, faded with age. I stopped in my tracks again. The whole thing felt impossible. I had never seen that bakery, not in this lifetime. Yet, I could see it clearly, as if I had been standing there only yesterday. It was like my brain was giving me a snapshot of something that didn't fit, an image of a place that wasn't supposed to exist in this time. I took a deep breath, trying to regain my focus. I was in the present. I was in this city, on this street, with no reason to believe anything was out of place. But it didn't feel like it. Not anymore. The memory didn't stop. It only kept coming back, more intense with each step. I could feel it rising in my chest, like it was a memory that wanted to be heard, wanted to be understood, but I couldn't make sense of it. I could almost hear the wind that would blow through the street back then, the noise of distant cars, the chatter of people I didn't know. I eventually made my way home, but the feeling didn't leave me. I kept replaying that moment over and over in my head, trying to make sense of it, trying to explain it. But I couldn't. I went back the next day, back to that same street, trying to retrace my steps. I thought maybe I'd see something that would help me understand what had happened, something that could explain why that memory had felt so real. But when I walked down the street again, nothing happened. It was the same as always, no flashes of the past, no odd memories of childhood, no sense of being stuck between two times. It was like it had never happened. But I knew it had. I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. Every time I walk down that street now, I half expect it to happen again. But it doesn't. It's just a street. But something inside me tells me I'll never forget that feeling. It was like I had walked down that path before. Like I'd walked down that exact same street, not as the person I am now, but as someone else entirely. Someone from a time I don't remember. It's hard to explain what happened, but I need to get it out. I keep thinking about it and trying to make sense of it, but every time I do, I feel like I'm missing something. Something big. It started one evening. I had just gotten home from work, and I was tired, like usual. I dropped my bag by the door, grabbed a drink from the fridge, and plopped down on the couch. I didn't have anything on my mind at first. I just wanted to relax. I scrolled through my phone for a bit, checking messages, mindlessly flicking through social media, just the usual. My phone was sitting on the coffee table in front of me while I stretched out on the couch, my mind somewhere between being awake and not really thinking about much. After a while, I decided to get up and make some dinner. When I stood up, I noticed something strange. My phone was on. The screen lit up like it was active. But I hadn't touched it, and I hadn't been using it. It caught my attention, so I walked over and picked it up, thinking maybe I had accidentally tapped something or opened an app without realizing. That's when I saw it. The screen was showing that I was dialing a number. It was just a strange string of numbers, no name attached to it. Not even a contact. At first, I thought it might be some kind of mistake or glitch, but I had no memory of dialing the number. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, trying to make sense of it. Maybe I had been half asleep. Maybe my hand brushed the phone and somehow started a call without me noticing. But it didn't make sense. I held the phone, waiting for the call to either go through or fail. But it didn't. The call just kept ringing. I waited another few seconds. The number was unfamiliar, and I didn't recognize the area code. The thing is, I don't get calls from numbers I don't know. I never answer unknown calls, so it seemed odd that it was dialing this number out of nowhere. I started to feel uneasy, like something was off. It wasn't like I was paranoid, but something about the whole situation didn't sit right with me. I pulled the phone away from my ear for a second, and the number was still there. I glanced at the screen again. It didn't match anyone I knew, no one I'd ever spoken to. I started to think maybe I had accidentally called someone I talked to a long time ago, Or maybe it was one of those robocalls that try to get you to answer by showing a number from your area. But the number on the screen didn't seem like any of those either. It looked too random, too out of place. I tried to hang up, but the call wouldn't disconnect. The screen stayed there, showing the same number, and the call kept ringing. I pressed the end call button multiple times, but nothing happened. It was like the phone wasn't responding to me. It wasn't frozen, it just wasn't ending the call. I stood there for what felt like forever, holding the phone in my hand, unsure of what to do next. The ringing kept going, but there was still no answer on the other end. The whole thing felt like a bad dream. I even tried turning the phone off and back on, hoping that would fix whatever was going on. But when I powered it back up and unlocked it, the call was still there. The most unsettling part? When I checked the call log, there was nothing. Absolutely nothing. The call didn't show up anywhere. It was as though it had never happened. No record of it, no timestamp, nothing to indicate that I called that number at all. It was as if I was just holding a phone with a call that didn't exist. I don't know how long I stood there staring at the phone, trying to process what was happening. It didn't make any sense. I'm not the type of person who gets easily spooked, but this was starting to feel like something I couldn't explain away. I waited another few minutes, hoping the call would end on its own. But it didn't. I still hadn't heard anything from the other side, and the number still appeared on the screen. I ended up pulling the battery out, hoping that would finally end whatever was going on. When I popped the back cover off and removed the battery, the phone finally went silent. I didn't touch it for a while after that. It sat on the table, turned off, as I tried to make sense of everything. I don't even know what I was expecting, but I couldn't help but feel like something was watching me, waiting. It was stupid, but the idea that something or someone could just make my phone dial a number without my knowledge made me feel exposed. Vulnerable, almost. After a few hours, I put the battery back in and powered the phone back on. There was nothing out of the ordinary. No strange messages, no unexplained apps or notifications. The call had disappeared from the screen, like it had never happened. But even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I spent the next few days trying to forget about it. I told myself it was probably some kind of malfunction or a weird glitch in the phone's software. But every time I looked at my phone after that, I felt this strange unease. It wasn't like I thought someone was messing with me, but I couldn't help but feel that the whole thing had been too weird, too out of the ordinary, to be just a mistake. I've never called that number. I've never tried to reach out to whoever it was on the other end, and I've never even tried to look it up. Part of me wants to, but another part of me is terrified of what I might find. The number still doesn't mean anything to me. And the more I think about it, the more I wonder if I ever will understand what happened that night. I haven't had anything like it happen since, and I haven't noticed anything unusual with my phone again. But the feeling of it, of that strange, unexplainable call, still lingers. I keep wondering if there's something I missed, something that might explain why my phone dialed that number. Or if, for some reason, I'll end up hearing from whoever it was at the other end one day. It's like a part of me is waiting for something that I can't quite put my finger on. And I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad one. I'm not sure where to start with this. I've been going back and forth in my mind for weeks now, trying to figure out if I'm just imagining things, if I'm going crazy, or if something else is going on. I never really believed in strange occurrences or anything paranormal, But this has me questioning everything. It started about 2 months ago. I was at home, sitting on the couch, watching TV after a long day at work. The windows were open because it was a warm evening, and I kept hearing the sounds of traffic and people walking by. Everything seemed normal. But then, as I was flipping through the channels, I caught a faint smell. It was like flowers, but not the kind you get from a garden. It was something more specific, sweet, but not overly sweet. Almost musky. I know it sounds weird, but it smelled familiar. It wasn't a flower I recognized, but it felt like something I should know. I couldn't pinpoint where it was coming from. I thought it might be my neighbor's perfume, but that didn't quite make sense either. It was just there, lingering in the air. It wasn't overpowering, but it wasn't something I could ignore either. The kind of smell that catches your attention even when you're not really thinking about it. I shrugged it off at first. Maybe it was something outside. A passing flower shop or some kind of scent from a nearby store. But the next day, I noticed it again. This time, when I was leaving the house. I stepped outside to check the mail, and there it was again, like someone had sprayed it in the air around me. I looked around, but I couldn't find the source. I checked the flowers in my yard, but they didn't smell like that. My neighbor's yard didn't either. It was as if the scent had appeared out of nowhere, lingering in the air around me. At first, I thought it might be some kind of coincidence. Maybe it was in the air or carried by the wind. But as the days went by, the scent kept following me. I'd be at work, sitting at my desk, and I'd catch a whiff of it, sometimes faint, sometimes stronger. It wasn't like a perfume scent either, not the kind you wear daily. It was somehow more delicate. It reminded me of something I'd smelled a long time ago, but I couldn't figure out what. Maybe it was a flower I'd smelled as a child, or maybe an old perfume my mom used to wear. But there was nothing concrete, nothing I could link it to directly. The weirdest part was that the scent seemed to follow me. No matter where I went, it was there, like a shadow. I'd catch it when I walked into the grocery store, or when I was sitting in my car. It would pop up in the weirdest places, like it was always waiting for me. I even started noticing it in the middle of the night, when I would wake up to use the bathroom. I'd be half asleep, and then, there it was again, faint, like it had seeped into the room while I wasn't paying attention. I tried to ignore it at first. Maybe it was just a trick of the mind, I thought. Some kind of subconscious association with a memory I couldn't remember. But then it started getting to me. I could feel my mind constantly reaching for an answer, trying to grasp at something, but it always slipped away when I tried to figure out where I had smelled it before. And the more it happened, the more I started to feel like I was losing my grip on reality. One night, I decided to go for a walk. I had to clear my head, and I thought maybe getting some fresh air would help. I was walking through the neighborhood, not paying much attention to anything around me, when suddenly, I caught the scent again. It was strong, almost suffocating, like it had surrounded me. I stopped in my tracks and took a deep breath, trying to place it. It wasn't just that it smelled familiar, it was comforting. Like I knew it intimately, but I couldn't remember why. The strangest thing was, it felt like it was connected to something in my past, but I couldn't put my finger on what. It was so vivid, so real, yet so completely out of place. I thought back to my childhood, but nothing stood out. My mom didn't wear perfume like that. My friends didn't wear anything like it. I'd never encountered a flower with that exact smell. And yet, there it was. It felt like the answer was just out of reach, no matter how hard I tried to grab onto it. The next day, it happened again. I was sitting in my car, waiting for a friend to arrive at the restaurant we were meeting at. I was parked on the side of the building, and the windows were down because it was warm. The smell hit me again, stronger this time. I looked around, but there was no one near my car, no flowers, no perfume shops. I rolled up the windows, thinking it was something in the air. But when my friend arrived, the scent was still there. I don't know if she noticed it or if she thought I was crazy, but it was there, hovering, like it was following me. After a couple more days of this, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to find out where the smell was coming from. I started retracing my steps, going over every place I'd been. I even asked people around me if they could smell it, but no one seemed to notice it except me. I checked the air vents in my apartment, my car, the places I visited regularly, but nothing explained it. No source, no reason. Just the scent. Then, one evening, something happened that made everything worse. I was cleaning out my closet, just sorting through old clothes, when I found an old box tucked away in the back. It had been there for years, forgotten, I guess. I opened it up, and inside was an old scarf I hadn't seen in forever. It was a gift from my grandmother, and I hadn't worn it in years. As soon as I unwrapped it, the scent hit me full force, stronger than ever. It was the exact same smell, the one that had been following me around for weeks. I held the scarf up to my face, inhaling deeply. It was the exact same scent. I'd never noticed it before when I had the scarf, but now, with everything that had been happening, it felt like the answer to all my questions. How had I never recognized this before? I sat there in my closet for a long time, trying to figure out why that scarf smelled like the very thing I'd been searching for. How had it stayed in that box, undisturbed for years, without me ever noticing the scent? Was it possible that it had been in the air all along, without me realizing it? Or had the smell somehow gotten stronger over time? I don't know, but it was the only thing that made sense. Ever since that day, the scent has been gone. It's like it vanished as mysteriously as it came. I've looked for it, tried to find it again, but it hasn't come back. But I can't forget the feeling it gave me, the familiarity, the connection to something I couldn't fully understand. Something that's still haunting me, even though it's no longer there. I don't know what happened, or if it'll come back. But every time I smell something faintly similar, my heart races. I can't stop thinking about it. It's like I'm still waiting for the answer to show up.